Okay. Okay, so I will get started. Welcome everyone to our values-based communications training from Rethink Media. I hope you're all well and excited for today's 1 hour and a half session. And we hope we can make this as engaging and thought-provoking for you all. And to get started, we have a quick icebreaker. So we can go to the next slide.
Sorry, 1 second.
Okay, so our icebreaker for today is, what are some core values that inspire you to do your work? So if you guys want to just type in the chat any values that inspire you in your work, and maybe we can get a few people to also talk about it off mute. Okay. Inclusion, fairness, integrity. Oh, we have someone else joining. Welcome, Anna, if you can hear us. We just started, so if you want to just go ahead and type in really quick your name, pronouns, and your role at NC Justice. And we just started with our icebreaker. And the question is, what are some core values that inspire the work that you do? And you can type in your answer in the chat. Okay, I don't know if I'm not seeing or only one person answered. Okay, anybody wants to actually share off mute? Yeah, Anna, probably because you just joined, maybe that's why you're just seeing yours. Ivy, would you mind sharing off mute? What are some of the values that inspire you to do your work every day?
Yeah, for me, it would be social justice, removing barriers for folks to access resources, and anti-poverty.
Those are great. Thank you, Ivy.
Right. Yeah. Anybody else wants to share? Care.
This is care.
Yeah.
This is equality, empathy, compassion, and justice.
I like care. It's just such a simple one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a driving force for folks working in social justice. Okay. So I think just before we get started, we wanted to do some just quick intros. My name is Mira Nabulsi. I'm the Senior Communications Associate with the Rights and Inclusion team at Rethink Media. And the Rights and Inclusion team is the team that works with BAMEMSA communities on a variety of different issues. And with me today is Christina. Go ahead, Christina.
Thanks, Mira. I am Christina Robinson. I am the Associate Director of Voting Rights at Rethink, and I am part of the Inclusive Democracy team. Some of you may know who Rethink is, but for those of you who don't, we are a pro-democracy communications organization focused on building capacity across movements. So we really work to minimize competition, maximize resources, and raise the voices of underrepresented spokespeople. And we do that a few different ways. We provide issue sectors with in-depth media, messaging, and opinion research. And we do a lot of trainings like this one and train advocates to level up their media skills. So we're both really excited to be here with you all today. And I will pass it back over to Mira to go over the goals for today.
And just really quick before we go over the goals, I wanted to just remind folks of a few norms that we want to establish for our session today. This training is designed to be interactive, so please try to limit interruptions during the time that we spend together. And please, if you're able to keep your camera on whenever possible. And, as you can tell, this will make it much more engaging, and it will make it easier to make connections with your colleagues and your trainers. And so also we will pause throughout the training to call on folks to answer questions and share their thoughts and reflections. So feel free to use the chat to also during of the training to, just share anything or ask your questions. In terms of our goals for today, that we're hoping that after attending this training, you'll have a better understanding of the power of shared values, that you'll develop a deeper understanding of key values relevant to your own audience, that you will cultivate expertise in using values to drive effective messaging strategies, and that you will practice framing and using voting values and the race and class narrative in your work. And we will be doing that through our agenda for today. Here are what we will be covering. We will talk about values and why values. We will see values in action, sharing a bunch of examples. We will talk about the race and class narrative. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. We'll talk about message resonance and overload, and then we'll have a few different activities throughout for about 30 minutes. So yeah, about an hour presentation, including some questions and engagement, as well as a couple of activities, Jamboard activities for you all. And with that, we will go ahead and start with our presentation. Go ahead, Christina.
Thanks, Mira. So right before we get into it, I just wanted to pause here real quick. Does anyone know what the most important aspect of all communications is? If you think you know what it is, feel free to type it in the chat. And this graphic is a hint. Okay, listening, clarity. Those are very important and they are tied to the answer. Yep, Jen, you got it right. It's knowing your audience. That's exactly right. But if the audience is what's the most important aspect of all communication, that creates a bit of a dilemma at times because not every audience is the same. We like to use this image because you see a variety of folks and a range of reactions being expressed. And what we have to figure out as communicators is, what do all of these folks have in common? What is it that really matters to them? Is there resonance, a connection between their beliefs and the messages that are being delivered to them? Really important to keep in mind that people size up their environment pretty quickly and make values-based decisions on the messages they hear right off the bat. So answering these questions is critical. And then similarly, talking about audiences, I just wanted to share this, this chart. So ideally, effective values-based communications, it puts you in line with your audience's values, and either implicitly or explicitly, it makes the case that your opposition's values are out of step. So you can see in the chart, we have, the unreachable audience, the opposition, the persuadable, the base, and the choir. And so when you're considering your audience, it's important to understand which groups you are best positioned to reach as a communicator. Because if your messages don't spread, then they won't work. This is especially true for persuadable voters. Research demonstrates that they hold a range of policy preferences and are relatively more malleable thinkers. And so by engaging our base, we can turn out potential voters who are already aligned and also generate the repetition needed for persuading conflicted ones, which are those in the middle of the chart. So our audiences are really persuadable and our base. And just keep in mind that there isn't always a normal curve in attitudes, but we like to share this example so that you can get an idea of, the folks that we are trying to reach with our messaging. So we are going to pause here for a 5 minutes for a quick activity. It's just a brainstorming activity. I'm going to share the link to a Jamboard. I'll put it in the chat. And let's take 5 minutes here to brainstorm who is North Carolina Justice Center audience in your own words. And it doesn't have to be just one answer. Feel free to use the sticky notes to fill the board with the audience that you all are reaching within your various programs, campaigns. Let me know if you have any issues accessing the link. I'm gonna go grab my charger. I'll be right back. So I see working North Carolinians, coalition partners, impacted people, lawmakers, policymakers, reporters and editors. Low wage, unlikely voters. Good, these are all good. And remember, the more specific that you are with your audience, the better. So for example, when we're talking about impacted people, impacted how? Or when we're talking about policymakers, lawmakers. Black North Carolinians in Eastern North Carolina, Western North Carolinians, Latinx populations. Great, great answer. Caregivers. Okay. We're going to move on for now. We'll reference this a little bit later on, but great job. Okay, and then now Mira is going to get us started with values.
So why values? Values are our most fundamental principles. They are the ideas that are so essential to our personal and maybe our national identities, that violating these principles can seem maybe something unthinkable. They're really powerful communications tools, and a means to establish a human connection that can cut through stereotypes and partisan suspicion. That's why we advise you and we encourage you to lead your messaging and your communications with values, because it can help create broad points of agreement and shared goals that will resonate with nearly maybe any audience. So while leading with facts and figures can reinforce an idea, they may not always do much to persuade. Whereas leading with values, on the other hand, activates emotions and opens your audience hearts and ears to the message that you're putting out there. So connecting to your audiences through words, images, and symbols, and even stories grounded in values can help make new information and ways of thinking a lot more accessible and relevant. And that's why we encourage you to think about the values that you could include in your messaging. Scientific research suggests that emotions
Spend any
play.
time on Earth.
All right, go ahead. Sorry, Mira.
Scientific research suggests that emotions play a pivotal role in decision making, guiding us toward choices that align with our values and goals. Research has also shed light on how emotional biases influence our choices, even when more logical alternatives exist. So that's to say that people tend to understand issues first with the emotional part of their brain, and then the rational part of their brain second. And to illustrate that even more, we will just watch this quick video to give you a better sense of what we're saying in terms of values versus facts, and what defines social norms for folks. We can
Notes that
play.
humans are not the most rational of creatures. We make decisions based mostly on emotions instead of facts, and a lot of times we're guided by tribal instinct. But the problem is that the human brain evolved to help us survive, and not necessarily to help us be factually accurate. So we often respond better to social and tribal dynamics than to intellectual analysis. For example, if someone's tribe believes that Obama is a secret Muslim born in Kenya, that person probably thinks the hard proof of his US birth certificate is fake. That conclusion is neither rational nor accurate. But from a tribal perspective, it makes sense. It's safer to agree with your tribe and stay united ideologically, even if you're wrong about the facts, than to disagree and isolate yourself. Another part of the problem is that our brain is constantly protecting our worldview and sense of identity. So when our worldview is challenged, that same part of the brain that processes physical danger gets activated. This is why people sometimes react so aggressively to information that proves them wrong. And this is why it's often so hard to have an intelligent political debate. Several studies have also shown that there is a backfire effect that happens when people encounter facts that contradict their current beliefs. They actually become more convinced of their original ideas. So fighting ignorance with facts is like fighting a grease fire with water. It seems like it should work, but it actually just makes the whole thing worse. Lastly, there's the problem of lack of empathy. Several studies have found that when humans are divided into groups of any kind, we instinctively become less empathetic to members of other groups. That means that for survival's sake, we might instinctively empathize less with other races, other nationalities, and even other sports teams. This instinctive dehumanization of other groups is what makes things like slavery and genocide possible in our society. So, what can you do? If you want someone to consider factual information that clashes with their beliefs, first you have to prevent their brain from seeing you as a personal threat. So look for ways to identify the person as part of your tribe and you as part of theirs. Hey, we're part of the same family. Hey, we're both parents. Hey, we both still play Pokemon Go. Whatever, anything that communicates that you're part of the same tribe. That's the first step. Second, consider the possibility that you may be wrong. Maybe the facts are not on your side, in which case admitting it will help you model to the other person that it's okay to be wrong. I understand that none of this is easy or smooth, but if we want to continue to function as a stable society, we have to learn to get past our own natural biases. Only when that happens, we will be able to move forward towards a better future. Peace.
So just a few takeaways from this video. They were saying how most people respond better to social dynamics rather than intellectual analysis, that our brains are constructed in a way that protects our worldview, that is why people may react aggressively when confronted with facts that just challenge or contradict their belief. And another problem that exists is lack of empathy, especially for people that we see as a different group than ours. So what you can do is look for ways to make the other party see you not as a threat, and identify others as part of your tribe as you are part of theirs. So people are more likely to accept and retain messages that appeal to their values rather than fact-based arguments. That's basically the conclusion that we get from this video. So this takes us to our shared values and the power of shared values in communications. It allows us to appeal and connect to people from different walks of life on a level that resonates. They also form the basis for whether an audience is going to like a speaker or not, and if they're going to continue to listen to them. So know that identifying the shared values across your different audiences is going to be really your best bet for successful communications. So if you look at this image that we have here, the circles, we see 3 different groups: elders, youth, business owners. What do you think they all share in terms of values? Any answers? You can type in the chat. Again, the question is, if you can picture some shared values between elders, youth, and business owners, what would that be? Any volunteers? It can be anything. Free speech. I would think that's something that it should be a value for everyone. Healthy neighborhoods, for sure. Functional communities, of course, yeah. Yeah. So really, I mean, these values that you guys mentioned, prosperity can also be shared with other groups as well. And that's really just simply what we're saying. Shared values can appeal to pretty much any audience. So another example to share is this example from a project that the Washington Post did a few years ago, specifically actually after the year Trump was inaugurated. 7 Washington Post staff photographers traveled across the US and asked people this very question: what unites us? The photographers set out to explore what unites Americans through interviews. They were looking to really see what values and beliefs are shared in a country that's thought to be pretty polarized at that moment. And as part of this project, they conducted 102 interviews and conversations, 2 in each of the 50 states and Washington, D.C. And they asked people to contemplate what it means to be an American in this time of upheaval and rapid change. So, some of the answers they got. These were the 7 unifying themes that came up the most. If I can get a volunteer, please, to read those. Anybody?
Community and empathy, opportunity and drive, diversity, freedom and fundamental rights, responsibility to engage, faith in the nation, and fear for the future.
So these were the 7 most common values that really they kind of heard from people after conducting over 100 interviews across the US. And yeah, I think pretty unifying and shared across many, many people, I think, even during this time of upheaval as they described. And with that, we will go back to Christina to talk a little bit more about voting values.
So if values-based messaging is the strongest strategy, as you know, we've outlined, and we're in the midst of a critical election year, then we would be wrong to not discuss some of the key values that people associate with voting, elections, and democracy. So here's a list of the top 6 values. The top value associated with voting in our democratic system is freedom. Voters across race, ages, and parties consistently rate this as the most important value that they hold as Americans. And when we use it, we want to draw a very stark contrast between how our opposition seeks to take away these freedoms and how we have and must continue to fight to protect them as we do. So this messaging has been tested for use across issue areas and has proven consistently effective regardless of the issue area. It's also been shown that the value of freedom is strongest when coupled with responsibility, which is another voting value here. And that the strongest value statement is that we need a system that is free and fair. And you'll see that fairness is another voting value. Because voters are concerned with fraud and meddling with our elections, security is another top value. Research shows that addressing these concerns with a security frame is critical to winning certain voting rights campaigns, specifically like around automatic voter registration across all demographics and in particular, even in red states. Concerns about voter fraud and illegal voting, they have become so intense and top of mind over the years that ignoring, minimizing, or trying to educate away from those concerns puts us on the wrong side of voters' values. Okay, so people, they want to know that their vote is accurate and that it will be counted, and we can expose the unfairness of the system to people by using these core values. And then similarly, Mira walked us through what were some of like the core values that resonated with Americans. Something else that's really important to keep in mind is that there are regional, cultural, and demographic variables that you should most definitely be aware of when considering shared values. For example, South Carolina is not Washington, D.C., and New York is not Florida. And we have an example here on the next slide. Could I get a volunteer to read this intro?
Texans fall victim to a lot of stereotypes. Some of them I can get behind. We love our football. Everything really is bigger here. Delicious, artery-clogging food is our specialty. And we're the friendliest, most hospitable bunch you'll ever come across, with big hearts to match the bigness of the rest of the state. Unless you're Texas State Representative Molly White, who made headlines this week when she joined the Islamophobia bandwagon with the following Facebook post.
So this is a really good example of how you can take like regional values, regional personality into account when crafting your messages to highlight regional and local values. And then this is a snippet that we took from an NC Newsline media interview with Anna, who is actually with us on this call. And so this was an audio interview, but this was the introduction. And let's read the paragraph and see if any regional or local values come to mind based on some of the issues highlighted here, because I think this is a great example. Anna, do you want to go ahead and read this paragraph?
Sure. For the past 2 years, unemployment in North Carolina has done more than return to pre-pandemic levels. It's actually dropped to the lowest level in more than 20 years. A closer look, however, reveals a more complicated picture, especially for the state's women. Indeed, in Oxfam America's recently released ranking in the best and worst states to work in America, sorry, there should be index in there. North Carolina came last in wages, worker protections, and organizing rights. The state was also ranked worst in the nation for working women. Earlier this month, in an effort to build on the Oxfam findings, researchers at the North Carolina Justice Center's Workers' Rights Project released a report that provides more details on the state of working women in North Carolina, and I recently discussed the report with project's co-director, Anna Pardo.
Thanks, Anna. So when you all read this and hear this, do any regional or like state-specific values come to mind based on some of the issues highlighted here? And if so, what are they? And feel free to drop them in the chat. So I think, worker protections. For sure.
I think we also in North Carolina, something we say a lot is like we're the best state for workers. Like we're constantly voted like the #1 state for businesses or something like that. So this
Okay.
kind of turns it on its head.
Okay. What other values do you think are relevant to North Carolina more than maybe another state?
So there's this whole narrative that if you haven't been in North Carolina for a long time, you might not have ever heard this because you might have only seen us dropping to the bottom of national lists. But there was this narrative when I was younger, like high school, college, etc., that North Carolina was like the top among the southeastern states, that we were, people would say we were the jewel of the South, and it was because we had good roads, we had an excellent college system. There was all this stuff that like was touted about North Carolina, that we were like, if you were going to live in the Southeast, we were the place you wanted to be because we had it going on, we had our stuff together. And so that's reflecting for me when I read this. And it's reflecting for me every time we work on any of the policy gaps that we're working on. I don't know how it figures, but it feels important to bring up.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Okay, let's move on here. We can pause here for questions before the next activity. Does anyone have any questions, comments that they would like to share? And there'll be another opportunity at the end for questions, so no worries if not.
Well, I just, the question that you were just asking us about regional values, as you see, I put the women's work versus men's work. I'm probably the oldest person in this meeting. And I do remember when it was strikingly obvious, the days, when it was more odd for women to be working than to be staying home. So I'm just curious what you think. What are the regional values you're talking about in relation to this paragraph? Because what it sounds like to me is it's drilling down and actually finding out that despite these return to or unemployment dropping way down, North Carolina ain't so great right now.
Yeah,
or it ain't so great as we thought it was, maybe.
So when I read this, some of the values that I thought would be important, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this is what everyone in North Carolina values, but these are the values that we want to highlight with our messaging, right? To counter what's going on in the state. So I definitely thought about equality because, like you said, women workers not being equal to men. So I thought equality, we can highlight the value of equality and the work that needs to be done to get there. Security. I thought of security when I was reading about worker protections. With wages, economic prosperity is a good one. Those are probably the top 3 values that came to mind when I read this paragraph. And
Hard work, maybe.
Say that again?
Hard work. Or also, I wonder if you guys, I think Anna was saying how there was this idea that that you guys' state was like, things were better, like infrastructure was better. Like, how much do you borrow from that idea? Even maybe now it's not necessarily true, but do you kind of bring that nostalgia of a value of like, we were on top, we were the best place to be? people were taken care of, or things like that, that maybe are or were part of that narrative into today's messaging as well. I'm just curious if that's something that you maybe already do.
I mean, I don't write the material, but I work on the design, obviously, and I have seen mention of such comparisons in some of the publications we have put out. Yeah, like, oh, we used to be called like Anna said, the good road state, and
Yeah.
how far we have fallen, as she said. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think there's value in it. I imagine like the narrative being like, hey guys, what happened? We used to be rad. We used to be routinely considered like one of the best places to live in the southeastern states. We're one of the best places to live in the South for reasons, right? What happened and how do we get back there? Like the idea that we can get back there feels very compelling to me.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's a great place to tie in values.
Thank you
Okay.
for answering. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think something that came up for me when talking about, how we want to lead with, a shared way to, say that we're kind of in the same group. And it just made me think so much about how I think we struggle sometimes with how our brand is, been known for the last around, 30 years that we've been around. Like sometimes when I look through our media mentions, it'll be like, so and so from the left leaning North Carolina Justice Center says, and I'm like, man, like, it's like, even if you're leading with how we're the same, it's like this public portrayal and that manner is automatically causing people to close their ears, and just like, how do we get past that?
Yep. And we're going to do an activity now that kind of to brainstorm like the shared values, and they don't have to be at the local or regional level, just in general, shared values that align with your mission and with your audience. And then we're going to do a messaging activity at the end, which I think will be really helpful for folks. So this is another Jamboard activity, and you can use the same link. Let me drop it again in the chat. It's going to be the second slide. And let's just take 5 minutes here to brainstorm, like, what are some of the shared values that align with your organization's mission and audience? There are no right or wrong answers. It is a brainstorming activity, just to kind of get you all thinking about some of the shared values that you all feel like you should be messaging around. So we'll take 5 minutes here. And like I said, it's the second page. And feel free to add as many sticky notes as you'd like. So I see fairness, accessibility, prosperity, good. Opportunity, it's a good one. Caring for neighbors. What else? I think economic security is one. I see that written in your mission statement, economic security. All right. Is everyone done? Should we move on? And just keep this open because we will use this for the final practice activity. Okay, so just quickly some things to remember. Values, they connect where details may not. It's scientifically proven that people contextualize information based on where they've been before and what they already know and believe. So, please remember that people, they filter new information based on their experiences and not yours. Really important to keep in mind. Secondly, you want to frame a choice. You want to put the audience at the fork in the road and frame a choice for them and characterize your choice as the more appealing one, the one that aligns with our shared values. When people choose to be on your side, they are exercising their agency and the shift in their thinking is more likely to stick. And then lastly, it's also the case that the values that people feel are powerful and can transcend other biases and prejudices. So here's where you can connect to experiences that people have, deeply ingrained values established from cultural, religious, ethical learning as a bridge to new information. So for example, you may not know what it's like to be X identity, but you know what it's like to feel emotions in a familial relationship as a parent, a child, a mother, etc. And we're going to watch this quick video. This is a clip from Now This of Hannah Freed. She's the executive director of All Voting is Local. And I think she does a really good job here in highlighting shared values in her messaging. And this is also going to be a really good transition into race class narrative because that is also mentioned here.
No matter our race, our background, or our zip code, most of us believe that for our democracy to work for all of us, it has to include all of us. Since the 2020 election, our right to vote has been under a deliberate and pervasive attack at the state level. All voters should have the freedom to vote equally, but a handful of politicians want to put up barriers to silence our voices based on what we look like, where we live, or how we vote. Here's why this matters right now. Despite the fact that the vast majority of Americans support voting by mail and want more access to the ballot, Republican lawmakers in at least 40 states have introduced more than 250 bills to restrict access to the ballot. Here are some of the worst offenders. In Arizona, Republican lawmakers have introduced more than 50 anti-democracy bills.
I'm gonna pause here because it's a bit of a longer video, but I really just kind of wanted y'all to hear the intro. Were there any values that stood out to you all?
Fairness.
Freedom. Yep. And this is a really good segue into race class narrative. This framework has proven to be a very effective tool for unifying diverse communities, advocating for shared economic prosperity, like you all do at NC Justice Center, as well as racial justice. Speaking affirmatively about, race, class, and gender, it strengthens our ability to mobilize our base and persuade the middle. Remember the chart that we went over, like that middle group, the persuadable voters. And it also allows us to challenge our opposition's worldview. Now, there is like a very specific ordering with this particular framework. It follows a specific architecture, and Amira is going to talk about that in the next slide, and then share some examples. And for some of you, this may be a refresher, but for others, hopefully it's something that you can incorporate into your messaging, or at least identify it when you are hearing or seeing messages.
Okay, so the race and class narrative checklist. So Christina was just saying how this type of narrative or framework follows a certain architecture. So this checklist will help you kind of know what to include if you want to use this framework in your communications. And when we say communications, because I think someone mentioned earlier, written material, it could be written material, but it could be also how you talk to people. It could be how you talk to the media. It could be just anytime you're talking about your work and your organization. Think about including these things in your messaging. First, lead with a shared value, pretty much everything we've been talking about today. So something that we hear a lot is people say, for example, most of us work hard for our families. Another thing to include if you're using the race and class narrative framework is to reference race in the shared value. This narrative does not shy away from mentioning race. And you can mention race, or you could mention actual, different races. But an example just to illustrate that is when people say, no matter where we're from or what we look like. Number 3, the race and class narrative also names a particular agent at fault. So we heard earlier in the video, the speaker was naming politicians or Republican politicians. So you can basically mention the opposition or mention a certain politician and say something like, this representative blocked affordable health care. And lastly, in the checklist, the race and class narrative describes a vision that includes everyone coming together. So you could be saying something like, we can ensure each one of us has the freedom to be ourselves. And in the earlier video, I think the speaker said something about how for our democracy to work, everybody needs to be able to vote. So kind of a vision where everybody's coming together or some form of unity. So this is the architecture, so to speak, or the checklist to keep in mind if you want to use the race and class narrative in your messaging. And in the next slide, we have a video from this activist. His name is Maurice Mitchell from the Working Families Party. And this is his keynote speech at the Netroots Nation conference from a few years ago. And I would like you guys to just pay attention to how he actually really does a great job using the race and class narrative. And if you can just focus on the checklist, the 4 things that we talked about. So again, leading with shared values, reference race, name particular agents at fault, so the opposition or the vile person or politicians, and finally describe a vision that's unifying and for all people to come together. So let's give it a listen.
People could look at this moment and say that our political and economic and social system are broken, but I disagree. I think they're working exactly as they were designed. A small cluster of wealthy people at the top, mostly white men, who hoard the wealth of our nation and divide working people, pitting communities against one another, just to fight for the scraps on the bottom. If there ever was a time for us to reconsider the ways of being that weaken our movements, it's now. If there ever was a moment for us to challenge the hyper competition that turned natural allies into adversaries competing for funding or clicks, here it is. For we who believe in freedom, these next few days cannot merely be a moment to trade business cards or trade tweets or recreate the old forms of politics that got us here. Which brings me to what's possible. I heard a sister in the back say, that's right, sis. Welcome from your.
Sorry. Was that the mark, the 6-minute mark?
No, I think it's just a tiny bit more.
Okay, hold on, let me go.
If you maybe want to go to 4.5 or something like that, because I feel like he did probably about half of the speech or about half of the clip.
People could look at this moment and say that our political and economic and social consider the ways of being that weaken our movements. It's now. If there ever was a moment for us to challenge the hyper competition that turned natural allies into adversaries competing for funding or clicks, here it is. For we who believe in freedom, these next few days cannot merely be a moment to trade business cards or trade tweets or recreate the old forms of politics that got us here. Which brings me to what's possible. I heard a sister in the back say, that's right, sis. What if in the midst of all this, we form a new kind of politics rooted in the compassion, grace, solidarity, and fierce urgency of now? What if we build a new movement committed to building power for everyday people in every county, in every state, with humility, with care, with curiosity, no shortcuts? And what if we repudiate once and for all the false choice between racial justice and economic justice? What if ordinary people stood together across difference, Black, white, brown, and said no to the oligarchs and demanded our fair share of what we create? What if our politicians cared just as much about what we think, each and every one of us, as they do somebody who can write a big check? Now, if we really believe in our right to Black Lives Matter, then Black people don't just sit.
Yeah, so I think, it was pretty clear how he used pretty much what we've been talking about. Lots of shared values that he highlighted, from care, freedom, different things. He referenced race. He also named the politicians of rich white men, and then definitely described a vision where we can come together. And also I like not just how he delivers, but also just the urgency and the prescribing of solutions, I think, and how we can come together and work on the issues. So that's one example. We have a couple more examples from social posts that use race and class narrative. And if I can get a volunteer to read, please.
No matter our color, party, or zip code, we all want an equal say in the decisions that shape our future. Thank you at POTUS for ensuring every person has a voice by committing to pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Hashtag SOTU. Then the second one, do you want me to go continue with the second one?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Like people have for centuries, immigrant Americans move here for the promise of freedom and opportunity in this country. Unlike my opponent who is trying to divide us by attacking immigrants, I support creating a fair process that respects all families and allows people to earn citizenship by demonstrating their commitment to our country, mastering our language and sharing theirs, and pledging allegiance to our laws. We can come together across our differences and build both safe communities and a safe and fair immigration system.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And so these were from social posts. We have just one last example about how to use race and class narrative in your messaging. And this one is from a CNN op-ed from a few years ago. If I can get someone to read this as well, this is just the lead of an op-ed.
Muslim hearings recall my life in internment camp. Who would have thought that my early childhood experience in a Japanese American internment camp during World War II would offer such useful insight 65 years later in determining the direction America is headed? In reflecting on this week's second round of Muslim radicalization hearings planned by New York Representative Peter King, I feel as if a mirror is being held up to my life, giving value to lessons learned as a child.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, these were some examples about how to use race and class narrative. Definitely you could go more creative and I think we'll have some more chances in the upcoming activity in the upcoming activity to actually practice some of that. So back to you, Christina.
Vera. Okay, so now we are going to break out in pairs. How many do we have? 6? So 6 of y'all? Okay. So we'll do 3 groups. Let me drop the Google Doc here. You'll work directly in that document, and what you're going to do with your partner is that use the space provided in the Google Doc. It's broken out by like which room number you'll be in. So you'll use that space to rewrite the quote using the principles we discussed today on values and race class narrative. And then, feel free to reference the Jamboards for any of the shared values that you want to highlight or any specific audiences that you want to include. And then we will come back and talk a little bit about like message resonance and overload, and then close with questions. Does anyone have any questions before I break everyone out? Okay. How was that activity for folks? Yeah, did you enjoy it? Did you find it difficult? Does anyone want to share what they came up with in their group?
I can share for group 1.
Okay.
Everybody in our community has the right to access good jobs, housing, and economic security. 1 in 4 people in North Carolina is involved with the criminal justice system. Chances are a person close to you has a criminal record. Malay said, we know that when reentry service providers and directly impacted community members work together for this new initiative, the community and the economy can prosper and thrive.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else want to share? All right, let's move on to the final portion of the presentation on message resonance, and Mira will take it from here.
Yeah, so basically we decided to include these couple of slides about message resonance and message overload because Andrea shared that this is something that you guys sometimes struggle with, to just measure the impact of your messages and see if they're resonating with your audiences, and as well the message overload right now. Maybe also because it's an election season. So we decided to put together a few tips that may help you come up with some solutions. First of all, I think it's important to understand that, this feeling of overload is pretty normal. It's just the reality. and give yourself a break, and don't expect that you're going to be able to cut through every like noise and all of the overload that's out there. And I think this is especially normal during elections because there's so many politicians and issues and bills and whatnot. So the overload is normal. But building on that, I think just going back to everything we've been talking about today, highlighting values in your messaging can really actually help cut through the noise. So the values-based approach can help overcome some of that issue. When you work on your messaging, you need to think about what are some of the values that we would like to be associated with as an organization or as a specific campaign, and think about what are the values that can actually cut through also the different areas of work. This is something that hopefully when you guys go back, maybe you could work a little bit around internally, and to think about what are the specific values that you would like to highlight that can speak to even through different areas of work and campaigns. 3, consider doing listening sessions, and maybe you're doing some form of that, but this is really just kind of a more low tech and less formal approach than an actual focus group. So what you would be doing is really when you go out to the community, when you go out to your target audience, the people you or the beneficiaries maybe of your programs, whether in the street, in the cafe, wherever you meet and see these people that you work for, just kind of ask them. And maybe you want to also invite them to your office if there's a capacity to do that. Just talk to them and ask them, how do you feel when you hear this following message? So this is what we mean by listening sessions. This can be one of the more reliable ways to understand what's resonating and maybe what's not, and just kind of adjust your messaging accordingly to be able to make sure that the audiences that you care about are actually getting the messages that will resonate with them. And then finally, I wanted to say, actually on that, in addition to listening sessions, you could also be doing something similar, but with your mailing list or listserv, where you could be sending a survey and asking folks how do they feel about certain messaging and if it's resonating. And this is something that we think media can help you with. It's a relatively cheap way to actually also measure resonance. So it's either that you do the listening sessions maybe outside or in your offices directly with people, or you could also do it through your listserv or mail list that you have for your organization of your members. And then finally, another thing that we wanted to mention is that Rethink Media is putting together some public opinion training series that will be happening in August. This is going to be 3 sessions. They're free, and you could join one or you could join all 3. And these sessions will help you understand better polls, what's a good poll, what's a bad poll, how do you track them, as well as how to use polls in your messaging. So these are some of our tips to cut through the overload and as well measure the impact of your messaging. And I hope they're useful. If you are interested also in getting more information about the trainings that I mentioned, the public opinion trainings, we're happy to share information and connect you with folks from our research and analysis team. And now back to Christina. Christina has a final case study to share.
Thanks, Mira. So I just wanted to quickly highlight this message test that I conducted in my previous role as communications director for a grassroots organization in Florida focused on getting out the Latino vote and engaging Latinos on various issues, one of them being climate change. So I know Mira mentioned like the listening sessions and the surveying members. I think when it comes to like digital message, I think digital message tests are a great way to measure the impact of your messages and see which messages resonate most with your audience. So in this particular case study, we use 3 different frames to measure engagement and action around climate change to Latina moms in Florida. So the target audience was Latina mothers in Florida between the ages of 18 and 45. And we tested 3 different message frames. The first one was collective efficacy, so really emphasizing community and the need to come together. The second one was focused around like cultural identity, specifically like what it means to be a Latina. And then the final frame that we tested was around family. And here is where like we used like the love of our children and the family value. So like we analyzed like the calls to actions and the click-throughs to identify which received the highest engagement. And you know, based on this study, we were able to frame a lot of our messaging on, you know, environmental justice issues and climate change to this particular audience. So I just really wanted to uplift this example. And if you have any additional questions, like feel free to reach out to me. Okay, we are about done. What time is it? It's 2:29. Does anyone have any final questions before we wrap? I know it's Friday. Really appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. Mira and I really enjoyed you know, learning more about your organization and all the great work that you all are doing. We are going to be following up with the recording and with the evaluation. So like a survey, if you all could take a moment to fill that evaluation out, we would really greatly appreciate it. I think Mira, she'll drop it in the chat here for everyone. Please fill that out for us.
I think Anna has her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I was just curious, like where and when would be opportunities for us to get sort of more. So I think I'm probably not by myself when I say that I learn better by doing. And so the breakout where we were sort of like reworking messaging, like I really am craving like feedback on like, okay, I see what you did there, but maybe this word or this kind of phrase or,
Okay.
Instead. And I'm wondering like what opportunities exist for that kind of training feedback.
Yeah, more than happy to. Mira and I can definitely review. I think we were just like a little short on time, but more than happy to reach out and provide feedback on that. There are some other resources that we can share with you all, but can definitely provide feedback on that training activity.
Yeah, and we are hoping, just based on the conversations we had with Andrea as we were preparing for the material, it sounded like maybe there will be an opportunity, and I'm hoping that happens, that you maybe get to take this training, and that it will offer you maybe just like a very first step for you guys to come together and do some internal work and practice. Whether within your programs and campaigns or whether with the communications team, to also incorporate more values in your messaging, or yeah, just consider how you could use it when you talk to anyone, whether it's your audience or beneficiaries or folks that you try to help with your work, or even, in conferences or media, whatever, like we were saying. So I do hope that, yeah, and we will send the recording, like Christina said, so you could revisit. I know sometimes may feel like a lot of information, but I think you'll have the opportunity to actually go back and see how we could think and rethink, I think, some of the things that exist, the material that exists, and maybe just make it a little stronger and incorporate some more values to be able to appeal to even a larger audience. But yeah, we're happy to help as much as we can after as well. I will say I'll be out on leave for a little while, but I'm sure my colleagues will be there also to support you guys. And this is something that we typically do as well, which is to help organizations with their messaging. Any other questions before we close? I think that might be it. Just a final reminder to fill the evaluation. We will also follow up with an email and send that link. The evaluation helps us just make this even better for next time we give it to other organizations. And folks, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.